The Maginot Line. What pops into your head when you hear that? Yeah, for most people, it's just the ultimate symbol of a spectacular military blunder, right? This massive, super expensive, and in the end, totally useless concrete wall that the enemy just walked around.
I mean, for over 80 years, this sprawling fortress has been Exhibit A in history's Hall of Fame for terrible ideas. It's so famous for being a failure that the name itself has become a metaphor, you know? We use it to describe any big, expensive project that gives you this false sense of security but completely misses the real danger.
Okay, but what if that's not the whole story? What if the story is way more complicated than that? What if the lean actually worked? I mean, exactly as it was designed to. So today, we're going to dig into the real story of this concrete monster and ask a kind of crazy question. Was the Maginot Line's greatest failure actually a direct result of its own success?
So to really get why France would pour a literal fortune into building this thing, you have to go back. You have to understand the deep, deep scars of the First World War. I mean, the country was just bled white. They lost so many people, and they were absolutely terrified of it ever happening again.
And this chart, this really gets to the heart of that fear. Just look at the numbers. After World War I, France had a population of about 40 million people. In Germany, almost 70 million. So French military planners looked at that and just knew, they could not survive another slugfest, another war of attrition. They had to come up with a strategy to, above all else, save manpower.
And here's what's so important to get. The Maginot Line was never meant to be just a wall. It was a really complex tool, and it had a bunch of different jobs to do. First, it was supposed to buy time for the army to get ready. It had to protect their most important industrial regions. But the big one, the most important goal, was to basically choose where the next war would be fought. And they wanted it fought anywhere but on French soil. The idea was to force Germany to invade through Belgium, just like they did back in 1914.
And, the politics of the 1920s just made it all seem even more urgent. There was all this diplomatic tension, and then in 1930, the last French troops left the German Rhineland. Suddenly, that buffer zone? Gone. France felt totally exposed, so in 1929, they made the call, we're building our shield.
Okay, so what was this shield, really? Seriously, forget any image you have of just a simple wall. We are talking about one of the most incredible, mind-boggling feats of military engineering ever. The scale is it's staggering. Look at this number, over 5,500. In total, the Maginot Line was made up of more than 5,500 individual fortifications. You've got 142 of the big main forts, they called them ouvrages, plus 352 casemates, and then something like 5,000 smaller blockhouses. It's nuts.
So as you can see from this map, the line wasn't just one long continuous thing. That's a common misconception. Instead, it was strategically packed into the areas where they thought an invasion was most likely to come from, along the borders with Germany and Italy. And the really, really heavy-duty stuff was all pointed right at Germany.
Okay, now this is what shatters that whole myth of it being just a thin line. It wasn't a line at all. It was a fortress in depth. We're talking 20 to 25 kilometers deep into French territory. It was this crazy interlocking web of defenses, all designed to just chew up and spit out an attacker long before they got anywhere near the main fortresses.
Imagine you're an attacker. The very first thing you'd run into would be hundreds of kilometers of anti-tank obstacles, just like these. They're basically 6 rows of giant steel rails jammed deep into the ground. The whole point was to stop a tank assault dead in its tracks.
And if you somehow got through that, you'd then have to fight your way through layer after layer of defenses. We're talking border posts, more anti-tank blockhouses, smaller forts, observation posts, all of this before you could even see the main event, those massive fortresses called the Gros Ouvrages.
And these big fortresses, man, they were basically underground cities. They had everything, their own power stations, air conditioning, kitchens, hospitals. They were connected by miles of underground electric railways to shuttle troops and ammo around. Some of these things could hold a garrison of over 1,000 soldiers, all living deep underground, totally safe from bombs and artillery. Incredible.
All right, so if this line was this untouchable underground superfortress, how in the world did it fail so badly? Well, the answer isn't a problem with the concrete. It's a fatal flaw right on the map, just next to where the line ended.
And here's the biggest irony of the whole story. The Maginot Line actually did its job perfectly. It was so strong, the Germans never even tried a serious attack on it.
It worked. It forced the German generals to figure out a way to go around it, and they found one, right here, through the Ardennes forest.
See, the French High Command, led by General Gamblin, they looked at the Ardennes, with all its dense forests and steep hills, and they just thought, no way. No way a modern tank army can get through there. They figured any attack would get bogged down, giving their own reserves plenty of time to show up and shut it down. And that, well, that was a fatal assumption.
The Germans, on the other hand, they took a huge gamble. It was called the Manstein Plan. And what did they do? They shoved the majority of their tank divisions right through that impassable forest. They burst out on the other side, crossed the Meuse River before anyone could react, and then just raced for the English Channel. In one move, they completely surrounded the best Allied armies up in Belgium. And the Maginot Line, it was just bypassed. The soldiers inside were stuck, forced to just watch as their country collapsed behind them.
At the end of the day, the Maginot Line was a total masterpiece of static defense. It was built for trench warfare, but it was built in an age that was about to be defined by lightning-fast movement. It was the perfect answer to the problem of World War I, but the Germans, in World War II, were asking a completely different question.
So the real legacy here isn't about a wall that got broken down. It's about a fortress that was just made completely irrelevant. France prepared perfectly for the last war, and that preparation blinded them to what the next war would look like. And that is why Maginot Line became this timeless metaphor for a false sense of security.
In that story, it forces us to look past the concrete and steel and ask a much bigger question. A question that's still super relevant today, whether you're talking about technology or business or even just our own lives. Are we so focused on preparing for the threats of yesterday that we're completely ignoring the new ones coming right around the corner? It makes you wonder, right? How do we avoid building our own Maginot Lines?